You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارشتايجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
I'm back after a day away, Kevin. I didn't quite know what to do with myself yesterday. I got to thank you for filling in there for me at the last minute. But
No worries. At least Orlando decided to do some breaking news, so I had something to talk about at least.
yes, Adrian Heath is no longer employed by the Orlando City Soccer Club, and that we'll touch on that a little bit in our final segment today. Get my thoughts on it because I know you talked about it quite a bit yesterday. But certainly a bit of a surprise. I don't think many of us had that in the pool of first coach to go this year, did we?
No, not at all. And it's weird because, well, like I mentioned, we'll touch on it later, but the Eastern Conference, the fact that it's so tight, outside of the top two now, there's a small gap, but Orlando, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd position are close. And after a 4-0 loss to Dallas and maybe tactically and not looking like the brand of football that Orlando is wanting to play, maybe those explains the move. But so we did have a lot of fun yesterday. I talked about that and a lot of things. And just a small game happened yesterday afternoon, Duane. I don't know if you saw it too. It was just a small game with no importance at all. Not a great performance, but I told you though. I told you a month ago that they'll get there.
There you go. Good for the French. It was a good effort for them. Maybe one of their more complete games. Well, the second half anyway. The first half, I thought Germany was a little unlucky, and we'll have more time to talk about this as well today as well. But, the setup of the final is it's interesting. I don't think many people would have had Portugal in there, obviously. There's a lot of people that don't like Portugal for various reasons. They don't like honking horns if they live in a city with a lot of Portuguese.
Basically everywhere. But, but you know what? They actually won the game, though. Their best game was probably the semifinal for Portugal and their first actual win outright.
Yes, I was on my hometown radio station today with our friend David Foyt on CJBQ in Belleville, and he made me give a prediction. And I actually, when the gun was to the head, I predicted Portugal would win the final, simply because it made no sense. So it would make it's my theory of what doesn't make sense has to happen. It's like the bizarro betting theories, right?
That 1% theory.
Yeah, bet whatever your instinct says, like George Costanza and Seinfeld back in the day, whatever his instinct said, he did the opposite, and he had the most successful week of his life. So, that's kind of where I was going with that. Kevin, today, though, we have a more serious topic we're going to talk about a bit off the top, and it's something that's been getting a lot of attention in the United States in recent days with the Major League Soccer Players Union releasing a statement against a bunch of youth clubs that are suing them essentially for not receiving solidarity payments. And it's a topic we talked about before on Two Solitudes. For those who don't know the solidarity payment stuff, it's simply this, is if you develop a player as a youth player that then moves on to another club and then gets sold from that club, in everywhere else in the world, with the exception of the United States, that youth club gets a small percentage of the transfer fee that ultimately went through there. The Major League Soccer Players Association, or Union, I should say, doesn't agree with this concept. The United States says it will hurt their players' ability to move to larger leagues. That's debatable whether it would or not. Certainly in the U.S., we know that they don't get paid, and it's been a controversial subject, especially when you consider that a lot of these clubs that are asking for these payments also operate on a play-to-pay model.
Yeah,
Kevin, that leads us to our question of the day, which was simply, should all U.S. youth clubs receive solidarity payments? Right now, 57% of the people who have responded to that poll have said yes. That's 43% obviously said no.
But I think to set the table clearly for that, there's two different models. If you're a player that pays, and some clubs, some academies ask for hefty sums monthly, and some of them are yearly, Some of them is just by principle. You pay $20, remember, and that's it. Some of them you have to pay for $5, $10, $15,000 a year to get better. It all depends on that situation too. If you're a player that pay $15,000 a year for 5 years at the academy that you were, example, well, do you actually owe them anything? That's another question. That's on the side of that story that we need not to forget sometimes.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a lot more nuance to this than I think a lot of people let on. It's sort of like they say it's pay to play. They shouldn't get any money ever again because they're just greedy and in it for the money. We have a guest on today, Will Parchman, who is with Top Row Soccer, obviously. He writes the 91st Minute blog there, and he had an article out earlier this week called, what's simply titled, "The MLS PU is on the wrong side of a training compensation fight." And he goes on to sort of lay the groundworks of why he feels that the players are offside in their opinion here. So we're going to talk to Will about that. But can we really get back to sort of our perspective on it?
The Canadian one?
Yeah, well, we pay it here.
Exactly. Well, there's instances in MLS going back to last year. If you go to the archive of the Two Solitudes Soccer Podcast, we actually talked about it and talked about how this was a precedent, and we actually predicted that this would happen.
Yeah. Specifically, if you're new to us, Daniel Henry, TFC homegrown player, was developed in a club called North Mississauga. Mississauga is a suburb of Toronto. So he came out of the North Mississauga Youth Club, and there's on record quotes from North Mississauga saying outright that they got a solidarity payment on his sale to West Ham United. So he came out of TFC. So a lot of people have painted this in an MLS versus youth club situation, when really, if you look at it objectively, it's not Major League Soccer that's holding back these payments. If the Canadian teams are paying them, it's the USSF. So, and the antitrust laws and a lot of sort of complicated stuff down there. When it comes to pay to play, obviously that is a system that we would like to move away from. So I can't get past the idea that if they were receiving solidarity payments, then maybe the impetus would be there to move away from the pay to play model. Yeah. That might be something that would allow them to do.
It's always who's going to make the first move. Right? It's always that vicious cycle. Are you going to start? So if you start, I'll go. But if you don't, I won't. It's always that vicious cycle.
The other thing too is that clubs that operate on P2P, they may have like a tiered system within their own club where their top elite level, like their truly talented players, are operating almost entirely on scholarships, because often some of these players will come from backgrounds where they can't afford those monthly fees or those yearly fees, so that they will have some way to compensate them so that they're paying less of a fee or that they're not paying a fee at all. And that may come from the pay to play players that are coming into the program. So if that's the system you operate on, is it as black and white with if you have P2P, then you can't get these solidarity payments? I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of nuance to this conversation, and it's sort of what we wanted to explore here. I mean, I'll say, that said, my position on it is that I feel that if the whole world is doing this, then it seems a little strange that one country shouldn't. And the U.S., however, has a history of exceptionalism, that they do things their own way. How many countries use the metric system type thing?
Every single one of them outside of two.
Yeah,
which is the U.S. and Liberia.
Yeah, American exceptionalism it's a long and proud tradition in the United States, and this sort of fits within those kind of arguments. So whether or not, and it's up to them ultimately to make these decisions, but if it's legally required of them, and that's what this suit is trying to determine, then that's a different story altogether than just we want to do things differently, like single entity or something.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a very, very interesting topic. And today as well on the show, we will have later on, Duane, our games of the week. The return every Friday, our games of the week, the ones we are looking for in the weekend. And today, as well, we have the Euro. So the Euro final preview will be included in our games of the week.
Yeah, and we'll talk about yesterday's game in our third segment a little bit, and then preview the final in our final segment. Like you said, there is Major League Soccer going on, obviously, NASL going on, lots of good stuff around the country going on.
And a quick little housekeeping notes. Unfortunately, the NASL Nightcap is on a hiatus right now. If you are a fellow podcaster and NASL freak, give me a shout out. sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com. Looking for a host.
Yeah, Kevin and I could potentially do something like that, but I think at this point in time that there's too much of our voice, that we need to have other voices come through. We'll provide you with support in terms of helping you get started, obviously distribution and all that sort of stuff. Kevin can even provide a little producing assistance to begin with. Ultimately, we'd like the show to be independent and distributed through us. And that's kind of the model that we're looking at to bring in. So if you're interested in that, certainly we'll help you get started. I can even help you out on an editorial side if you want to have a little support getting contacts and things like that off the top. So obviously we'll provide assistance, but it is something that it's important to us to have a different voice that's coming out to talk on that show.
And I want to say Theo is not gone forever. It's not a adieu, it's an au revoir. So Theo, can't wait for you to come back. You will be back one day, and you know that always love dealing with Theo. Theo is one of the classest act in our community.
And in the meantime, we do have Ours with Fury is on the network, so there is some NASL news there, and we will continue to get conversations out around NASL on our various platforms as well. So we're not going to completely ignore the league. It's just that show in particular is in need of a new host, and we hope that very passionate community, and they are very passionate, someone should be able to step up and help us out there and help the community out, because I think it provided a valuable service. I listen to it all the time, Kevin, because I don't have, there's only so many hours in a day, right? So having that regular thing that I could put in my earbuds when I'm doing something else and just sort of absorb the NASL news that he was really digging for was something that was really valuable in my week. So I certainly hope that can come back sooner rather than later.
Oh, exactly. That's exactly the idea behind it.
All right. We have a couple minutes before we go to break. If I'm a little distracted today, if we go non-soccer just for a second, it's because maybe the most important game in Canadian tennis history is on in the background right now.
I just realized that he made it to the fifth set. Sorry, because I was busy doing the show for the last 15 minutes. But Milos Raonic right now is winning the fifth set 2-1. So
2-1. Yeah, they're on serve.
On serve.
Milos came out of the blue. It was he was up 5-4 heading into the service. Was it 5-4? No, he was up 6-5, and everyone assumed it was going to a tiebreaker because Federer was on serve, and he was up 3.
It was 40 love. Yeah, it was 40 love for Federer.
Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly we come back, and here we are.
Boom,
you got the
boom,
break.
boom, boom. Let's go back to my room, Duane.
Yeah, there you go. Good stuff there. I love the Milos. He's going to eventually. I tweeted out that if Federer's not a vampire, and I'm not discounting that possibility, that he very well could be. It doesn't really make any other sense otherwise that he's this good this late in his career. However, if he's not actually a vampire, isn't actually immortal, that I do believe that Milos eventually is going to crack that top 4 based on what I've seen this week, Kevin.
Count Roger. Sounds good to me.
Exactly. Count Roger. It's kind of more fun to watch Federer because everyone loves Federer, right? It's kind of more fun to watch him and imagine him as a supervillain. Like that he goes back underneath the Wimbledon stands and it's like puts his fingers together like Mr. Burns. It's kind of more fun to watch Federer.
He goes back home, sniffs mountains of illicit substances, and I can see that happening. Yeah,
Roger Federer, supervillain. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and get the interview going up.
And we are back on soccer today. It's with great pleasure that we are joined by Will Parchment of Top Drawer Soccer. Will, how you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you guys?
Good. Well, obviously, we're having you on to talk about the solidarity issue stuff that's going on right now. You wrote a good column this past week on your 91st Minute blog there. If you could just set us up, talk a little bit about what that article was about, and then let's have a conversation about the issue in general.
Yeah, so I mean, on a basic level, you've got two sides. I mean, you've got the players who are saying that, you know, when we're sold on, if our youth clubs are getting money, that's money coming out of our pockets, and the clubs are saying, well, we deserve that money because we helped produce you, and this is the way it's done everywhere else in the world, and it'll help us kind of become better in the long run because then we have more resources. And my main point is that the clubs will win eventually, just because they have the power of sort of global perspective behind them. That's the way it's done everywhere else. And, you know, ultimately they're right. I mean, the way to sort of stoke progress is to inject more funds into the sort of the lower tiers of youth soccer, which patently is not done in America, and, you know, in Canada as well. And so I think the more, you know, the system is sort of flush with cash in areas where it's not, which right now here is in youth soccer. You know, that'll only benefit the clubs in the long run, and, you know, maybe they're able to subsidize the game a little bit more, and pay to play takes a back seat.
Yeah, and I was going to go with the pay to play question next. That is obviously the comeback that a lot of people have when these clubs say that they deserve this money. They'd suggest that if they're on a pay-to-play model, that maybe they don't, that maybe that they're already getting compensated for developing these players through these club fees. What would you say to someone who made that argument that this is the reason why the solidarity payments should not be paid out?
Yeah, well, I think my argument would be that, you know, then it becomes this intractable cycle where okay, well, you're not going to pay the clubs because they're profiting off of these players already. Then we just keep going around and around, and they're not able to kind of claw their way out of the basement because you're not empowering them to do so. And I should mention too that a lot of these players, you know, Clint Dempsey included, Landon Donovan included, didn't pay for their club soccer. I mean, they were on scholarships, or they were in a free-to-play academy. The Dallas Texans, who were Clint Dempsey's club, Omar Gonzalez played there, Emerson Hyndman, who's just signed with Bournemouth in England, also played there. Their development academy club is free, and they're not an MLS club. So they've taken pains to do that. They've, you know, they do a lot of money drives in the community. They've been able to cobble together quite a bit of funds to be able to make their development academy free. So there are situations where, in most of the best players in the country, they don't pay necessarily for their development academy experience. Now, obviously, that's not the case with everybody, or even the majority. But at the same time, I do think there are shades of gray where you have to be able to say, even if it's a uniquely American system where we sit down and sort of hash out something that's not done in Europe, I do think we need to say, okay, well, we need to value our clubs enough to where we need to start paying them for these players that they're producing.
Well, another argument you'll hear back is that the clubs, quote unquote, are only in it for the money. And there's this sort of mistrust about the idea behind this, that it's a quote unquote money grab or what have you. You wrote in the article pretty glowing terms about why you feel that's not necessarily the truth, that you felt that it was pretty clear. Obviously, there's some money involved in this, but it's clear if you're out there on the grassroots at the level watching these guys perform that there's more going on there. Do you want to just speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a fair amount of time around development, around, you know, development academy playoffs, and, you know, a lot of these clubs. And, you know, I think there's nothing, to me, there's nothing that could be further from the truth than, you know, these clubs are simply out to profit on the back of these players with no sort of view towards their, you know, their well-being. And I think from the players union, they can make a few cases that to me are prescient. And one of those is that, as we mentioned, that, you know, the money thing with pay to play. And I think that they can make an argument there, a legal argument there. I do not think they can make a legal argument they're profiting off the back of the players. Merely as I think that Philip or Foose over at the MLS Players Union called it a shakedown for money, which I think is kind of funny because, none of the clubs are hawkish about this at all. They're very conciliatory. They almost apologized that they had to put the players' names in the lawsuit because it was just sort of a legal thing that they had to put them there. And they were like, well, we'll take Clint Dempsey's name and Michael Bradley's name and DeAndre Edlin's name off the lawsuit as soon as we can. We didn't want to do that. So yeah, I just don't think there's any basis for it. I mean, these clubs, if you think about it, these clubs spent hundreds and hundreds of hours helping to develop these players, and they developed relationships with them. And so there's sort of no backing to the idea that the only thing they want from them is money, because at the end of the day, they want to be able to produce more kids like DeAndre Edlin. And to do that, they need more resources.
When we're looking at academies and development system, well, in Europe and outside of the world, there's some academy system that are built for profit, and it's okay. They give a service to players and say, look, down the road, we're going to get a certain amount of percentage. What do you envision for that type of model for the United States, for North America? Because between all of us here, it's always like, yes, we want to agree with you to give you money, but first you got to do, it's always a vicious cycle. Who's going to start this system? What do you envision for the future and maybe after this whole thing is resolved?
Yeah, I think there's a place for pay to play, honestly. It's so vilified that we kind of forget that some kids necessarily aren't good enough to have, full ride scholarships at clubs and aren't good enough to play for a development academy club. And that's fine. There's a place in the market for it. I talked to Brad Friedel a couple months ago about this, the new US U19 coach, and he was saying that, there's no reason to collapse a $2 billion industry simply because, this small percentage of players that we need to be, quote unquote, world class aren't coming through the system. Now, that said, you do need to be able to identify the players that need to be set apart from pay to play at an early age. And I think that's where the system falls down. Is the development academy right now is doing a much better job of making itself free. Obviously all the MLS clubs, with the bizarre exception of DC United, are free to play, and a growing number of non-MLS development academy clubs are free, but we don't do a good enough job of plucking out players who are being forced to pay and thereby forced out of the system and taking them into these free academies to say, it doesn't matter your resources. You just need to play. You need to get better. And we don't do a good enough job partitioning those two things. And that's where what they do abroad, they do a great job of that. Because if let's say Aiden Hazard in Belgium is in, this club at 5, 6, 7, and it's not right for him, well, there are so many eyes on him that that somebody's gonna pluck him out and say, okay, you come to our pro academy, you don't have to play, or you don't have to pay. And that's exactly what happened to him. And it's exactly what happens everywhere. The cream just kind of naturally rises. And once we can do a better job, and that this goes back into scouting and some other things, once we do a better job of identifying those players, then pay to play won't be sort of the demon that it's sort of painted out to be right now.
The other thing that I'm wondering, well, if you're looking at the coexistence between those two systems, right now there's a small clash, and we're seeing this becoming a literal clash. What do you expect to be the best way going forward for the cooperation between the two? Should the pay-to-play be involved in the other system to detect some players? Because if you have two systems battling each other, well, you're going to have kids stuck between two systems, and this, in my opinion, puts unnecessary pressure on kids to choose where to go, and you can lose a kid, and if you lose one talent, for me, it's already too much. How do you see the coexistence between the two? And if pay to play is the entryway or the gateway into the development of the pyramid of soccer, should they help detect the guys that are necessary to go, look, you're too good, go where it's free and you can actually become better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they need to be part of that discussion. And I think what U.S. Soccer would have done if it had the resources to do would be to make the development academy 100% free to play from the outset, and to say, you can't, one of the criteria for membership in this league is that you have to pay, you have to be free. And I think there are 80 clubs in the Development Academy right now. And I want to say maybe half are free. And the problem with that, as you mentioned, is then you have this sort of coexistence between pay to play and free clubs. And that's obviously not ideal. So I think if US Soccer had the resources, they would say, all of these clubs are subsidized or they have the resources to be free. And that sort of segments, the development population, where you say, this is the top of the ladder. And we're looking out for kids where we can fold them into our academies. And if you come to our league, this is free. And then you create an expectation of players where, okay, well, this is the top of the ladder. I know if I'm going to be in that league, then, all my, expenses are paid. And there's no expectation for that right now. There is no 100% free high-end development league in this country, and that there's no, it's just sort of all washing together. And so eventually I would like to see that happen, and then you can start to see the conversation be, okay, well, these are paid leagues, these are free leagues, and then we can kind of start separating a little bit.
Well, we determined here last year, and we confirmed it, that in the Daniel Henry sale to West Ham United from the TFC system, he came up through the TFC Academy after first being developed at a local club called North Mississauga here in the Toronto area. We did confirm that a solidarity payment was paid to North Mississauga. So that would seem to indicate to me that the what's preventing these payments from happening isn't coming from an MLS level so much as it's coming from a USSF level. Is that something that you would agree with, would understand as well?
Yeah, I mean, as far as what I know, MLS and even US Soccer to an extent are open to sort of, sit down at the table and chat about it a little bit. I mean, they're definitely, withholding what they're going to withhold. And, MLS has definitely played its part. I mean, they're not, they're not open necessarily, more open than US Soccer. I think the MLS Players Union is really the one driving all of this. They're the sort of the attack dogs. They're the ones that, are bringing a lot of this stuff to bear. And, that's not to say that US Soccer and MLS are both, totally cool with all of this stuff. I mean, MLS withheld, I believe it was DeAndre Yedlin when he was sold to Tottenham Hotspur from Seattle. They were contacted by Spurs once Spurs went to Akron University, Yedlin's college. And, that kind of quickly put the kibosh on all that. So I think the Players Union is sort of the domino that has to fall. They're the ones that aren't really willing to come to the table and talk. And so I think once you get them sort of in line, and it may take a major landmark court ruling to do it, then I think you'll see US Soccer and MLS, which do have public relations stuff to consider. I mean, they do have more of a sort of a public outcry that they have to manage, whereas the Players Union doesn't. Then I think you might see, them hash out a uniquely North American style of solidarity where, maybe it sort of has to fold underneath the antitrust ruling somehow. We do see a lot of things in North America where they're just sort of like tailored to our experience because it's so unique here, but something needs to give. And, hopefully that's the Players Union.
To put it in as simple terms as possible, my understanding of the players' resistance to this is they feel it would restrict their ability to move to Europe. That this would prevent the teams would be reluctant to pay additional fees to cover these solidarity fees, which, when you're talking about millions of dollars, might not necessarily be the most logical conclusion to come from that. But is that the being hold up from the players' side, and do they have any validity in that position? If so.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly what they mentioned. I don't see at all how that would come into play. I mean, under FIFA's rule, it's like 2 to 5% is the sliding scale based on how much time a player has spent at that club. That club gets somewhere between 2 to 5% of the overall transfer fee. Clint Dempsey, when he came back to MLS. The Dallas Texans are alleging, based on his $9 million transfer fee, they get $180,000. Now, is that really going to, kill a deal? whether he's moving from the U.S. to Europe or Europe to the U.S. And I just can't possibly fathom how that would, how that would put the kibosh on it, especially when, European clubs are contacting MLS clubs during these negotiations before anything's even happened about sending solidarity payment. They're literally willing to send it before the conversation has even started. So that to me is a non-issue. The bigger issue for them is probably just that it's money out of their pocket that they're not getting, out of the overall transfer value, because it's going to the clubs. And that is a little bit more understandable, just because it's their money, or at least that's what they allege, and they deserve to have it in their pocket. And on that, I think we can debate that, obviously in the long run, it's better to have the clubs have a small cut rather than, what percentage does the player get? It's still a huge percentage. So that's probably their biggest holdup, is just, and naturally the players union is going to go to bat for the players and say, well, they deserve all the money, rather than most of it. So I think that's probably the biggest holdup. At the end of the day, though, when a court looks at that, they're going to, I can't imagine them siding with the players on that.
It's a little harder to defend from a PR perspective when it's about keeping money in your pocket versus helping at the youth club that helped you along as well. So you can understand why they might focus on the other. To take this to a more general position to end the conversation, I'm just wondering whether you feel, as someone who covers the development side of the game, the academy side of the game, whether the MLS academies in the markets that they're operating at a high level are doing enough right now to both integrate themselves in the local communities so that they are getting the most out of that and helping those communities out. Do you feel that the MLS academies do enough to cooperate and be good citizens in their communities that they're operating in?
Yeah, I think for the most part they do. It does depend on the market, because if let's say you're the LA Galaxy, you're operating in a space where you've got dozens of high level academies, so players have a lot of options. So in a lot of cases, you're fighting for kids, and when kids choose the Galaxy, which is obviously the only fully sort of U12 to pro academy in the area, you're stealing kids, essentially. At least that's the way that the other clubs would look at it. So that's going to create a lot of acrimony, and there's nothing really that the Galaxy can do about that necessarily. Other than, not actively try to poach these kids. The kids just want to play for the Galaxy. And so if a club loses a kid like that, then all of a sudden, they're bitter, which is a natural reaction. But at the end of the day, development is sort of an us versus them sort of mentality. That's just the way a lot of clubs view it, where we have our kids and you have your kids, and a lot of these teams play each other, and we have our development style and you have your development style. And a lot of the non-MLS clubs look at MLS clubs as sort of haughty and like they think they've got it all figured out, when a lot of the clubs don't really put that out on the table. But I think for the most part, now that the Development Academy is nearing 10 years old, they've done enough in the community, and they've showed enough goodwill, and a lot of the coaches are just really good guys, and the academy directors sort of are figuring it out. How do we sort of be good stewards, and not do the wrong things by these kids, because at the end of the day, they're kids, and these are 13, 14 to 18 year olds, and you got to deal with their parents and their all their buddies on the team, and so it's not easy. But I do think that slowly but surely, we're sort of starting to figure out how to be good stewards of these kids' futures, and how to sort of figure out how do we make them better.
I think that the best thing to ever happen to the Toronto FC Academy has been the emergence of Sigma Academy up here. That competition really sort of, I think, spurs everyone to be a lot better. Well, always love a good development conversation. We do appreciate your time. What's going on the site? Anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
Yeah, actually today I've got something going up. I've been working on it for a little while on the Generation Adidas initiative. I'm going to make the argument that it's time to put it out to pasture. That it's done for. But yeah, I talked to Brian Dunseth, who was in that first GA class, and so yeah, I think it should be pretty interesting.
All right, Will, thanks for your time again, and we'll talk soon, hopefully.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Milos.
I know. That's why I stopped it, because it's a good thing that mute button does exist. Thank you very much, Will Parchment, and congratulations, Milos Raonic, and bye-bye, Roger.
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love the conversation with Will. It's always interesting to talk development. It's one of my favorite subjects. But certainly, I got to say, when Milos Raonic broke Federer to sort of get the advantage in that fifth and deciding set, my headphones flew off my head.
Exactly. A little quickly, a lot of reactions on Twitter from a conversation I had earlier on Twitter with Alexi Lawless, according to about solidarity repairment. First of all, Alexi Lawless comments, it's disingenuous to say it's not about money. It's about money. Think if you charge kid, you shouldn't get anything later. Reactions started flowing. A lot of people agree with him. A lot of people say, but don't the clubs need payment before they can stop charging kids? That's the cycle we talked about. If you have solidarity, then clubs wouldn't need to charge as much. I would stop pay to play. A lot of people are like this. We have Silvana Budesheim on Twitter as well. What I don't get is how other clubs charge 3-4 times my little club does. We're a non-profit. Are they? That's a question. Even if nominal fees to cover expenses, why does FIFA say otherwise? The rest of the world comply. Why not American? American exceptionalism? A lot of reaction on this topic on Twitter today, Duane.
Oh, it's a topic that'll get people going. It's a soccer geek topic, nonetheless. It's not like we're going to go to a water cooler somewhere in just a business out there in amongst the normals, quote unquote, and are going to have this conversation. But certainly amongst soccer geeks, it's a big talking point. And exactly, they fall down the fault lines that you just mentioned there. The pay to play, people hate pay to play that are in soccer development circles. They think it's a real drain on the system. But I think it was interesting how Will said that there's room for it within the system as sort of something that helps fund the rest of it. That's an interesting take on that. Something that I hadn't really considered before. Whether the house league, but when you think about it, whether an elite club at their elite development level doesn't charge, but maybe they charge their house league kids to pay for the referees, to cover costs there, and to add a little bit more to that ultimately goes back in to help the development. And look, I think that there's the great thing about it, if you're a free market guy, is that it is really a free market. The soccer market in North America, you generally have lots of choices on where you want to send your kid, where you want to play. Options, if you're in a big center, are multitude. I mentioned it here in Toronto. I mean, you have TFC Academy, you have Sigma Academy, you have Pro Stars, you have Toronto Skills, you have tons of academies that you could generate. That's just off the top of my head, a few of them I named, and not to mention the youth clubs locally, right?
And you have to be careful as well where you send your kids, because not everything is always as it seems. Some of certain quote-unquote schools or academies that are not necessarily there for the right reason, and you have to be careful. You have to make assessment of what you want your kids to play in what environment. And once you decide that, then you choose accordingly where you're going to put your kids to play.
All right. If people have strong opinions on that, reach out on Twitter. If there's enough people interested.
We have more. I have more doing that.
Okay, go ahead.
Simple solution, minus $1 family pays while at the club from SPs. How else do we solve that pay for play conundrum? It's true though, because if you don't take out what either the families that do host some players that are in academies that are actually playing out of home, and that's another question too. When you have in more rural areas or more outside of big region areas, an example, I'll use the Quebec province as a whole. there's a lot of kids that are in residency program that are from 6 hours away road-wise. And when they come here, they have a residency program. There's more expenses too. So there's a lot of sides to that story because it's almost a case-by-case situation.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there are scenarios out there in which pay-to-play is just absolutely wrong. I would say that, Dallas, for instance, charging their kids at the academy there is just something that I don't get. And it's unfortunate because it's such a good academy otherwise, right?
DC United.
So, yeah, pardon me.
Speaking of DC United news this morning, Lloyd Sam has been traded to DC United. As spoke about yesterday in the show, he was being shopped around, and quickly he has been traded to the DC United today.
Yeah, he was informed yesterday, I believe. So
yesterday, yes.
Yeah, the tweet that went out, I'm in tears right now. So certainly that. No, I mean, look, if you're at the very top, I think there's an obligation. I do believe this, that if you're at the very top of the system, that there needs to come a point where you should be required almost to have a program that is designed with nothing but giving back into the system that you're feeding off of otherwise, right? There's a lot of people that make a lot of money off of youth soccer. I think that it's the very least we can ask of those folks to at least provide some options, some scholarship options, which are there and exist for no other reason than to produce players to help feed the system and help make the system better. Because there's always going to be kids like Kevin and I that love the game but don't have the talent to go on to an elite level, that are going to want to play the game as long as we can, that are willing to pay money. And even like I pay money into the game every day still, right? Like I play in men's leagues. I do what
you do pay to play to this day.
Yeah, it's not in a sanctioned league, but nonetheless.
You're still paying and you're still playing. So you're
yes,
paying
exactly.
for playing.
So there you go. A pay-to-play model for fat adults is I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anyone would, but certainly I think the kids, they deserve a lot. And I think, as I said, I always bring up the Sigma example here because that is a model that's really working for them. And a lot of, without getting too much into the details that I don't quite have all the details of anyway, but what I know of how they finance themselves, a lot of it has to do with the idea of selling on. So I don't have an issue with the quote unquote, it's about the money when it comes to solidarity payments, because that is what's allowing a club like that to thrive. The idea that they're going to get money down the line for a Kyle Larin if he moves to Europe. And my understanding is that Sigma is in line for a nice payment when Kyle Larin moves to Europe, and that will end up feeding the next 10 years of that program and developing more Kyle Larins. And I think that's what we all want, and regardless of what country we win, regardless of what MLS team or NASL team we support.
Exactly, because let's not forget, we're talking about a situation here where 0.0001% of the kids at the academy created are going to be sold eventually. So it's that percentages that funds the rest of it too. So there's that side of that equation.
All right, Kevin, let's take a break now. We could probably talk about this all day, and maybe we will have to revisit it next week as well, because it seems like there's a lot of conversation about this. But we do have to talk about the Euro game yesterday. We have to talk about the games of the week. There's lots to go in and plug into a short period of time. So let's take the break now, come back with that, and we'll revisit this next week.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, FeedBurner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
I'm not going to lie, I'm still buzzing a little bit over this tennis, Kevin. I've been a tennis fan my whole life. Oh my God, there's a Canadian in the final of Wimbledon. I'm pretty stoked.
Milos beats Federer. Anyways,
I know.
And France beat Germany. I'm buzzing for that. Tony Gries, Antoine Griezmann. What a man. 6 goals in a Euro. Wait, if he scores a hat-trick Sunday, he ties the record for the most amount of goals in Euro as a whole with Platini and Ronaldo, and he would have done so in 1 year.
Yeah, look, and We were having the conversation about who the Golden Boot would be, and a couple shows. I don't think there's any question anymore
Tony?
if France goes on to win this.
Tony gets a Golden Boot anyways. The closest guy is 3.
Yeah, MVP I meant, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Golden Boot, Golden whatever. I always get the Goldens mixed up, which is which. Sorry, forgive me there. We should mention that there was a CONCACAF draw of some kind today, and of course, it being CONCACAF, they screwed it up, and the live stream wasn't available.
Oh, I thought they took from the wrong pot again and had to restart the whole thing, which we've seen before.
Well, the whole silliness about the CONCACAF hex draws, they're just drawing for game position, right? So, there's the 6 teams. We don't even know what 6 teams are yet. We have an idea. So there's no draw there. So there's no drama to this damn thing. It's just where they're going to play the game first. And they still somehow managed to always have Mexico play the United States in February, and they play the game in Columbus a couple cycles in a row. So is it really a draw? I don't know. Who knows? It's CONCACAF. God knows. It's new days with CONCACAF. We shouldn't say that. Victor's in charge now. There's a good, noble Canadian in charge. So hopefully those battle days are gone.
Yes, it is. So
it's a brave new day.
New day. Speaking of brave, France, I just can't get over it. Germany played awesome. Like they evolved, and yes, they were missing a lot of kind of their core with the Khedira, with injuries, and with Gomez as well. They were like close to missing their backbone, but the possession they were doing in the first half, their chances, the way they had to outstretch Lloris, which is already tall to start with. So great performances, but then Bastian, what was he thinking?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe the German volleyball team made an appearance in this tournament for some reason. I'm not too sure about that. There were the usual suspects out there. He's been a guest on this show before, so we'll do him the favor of saying his name. Kurt Larson is the only person on earth, I think, who doesn't think it was a penalty. But Kurt, I don't think, wants any handballs called ever, as far as I can tell. No disrespect, Kurt, but that's sort of what I get from that. I don't understand, because it was really a tournament defining and changing moment, that call in the end, because I do think that Germany was clearly on the front foot in the first half, and then that happens and it changes everything in the second half, and then France did exactly what they needed to do to take advantage of that. They finished the penalty, obviously, and they went into the room with the momentum and the crowd up and roaring and on their side, and away we go, and just a full measure for the win in the second half. Yeah, and it was a newer error as well on the corner, on a ball that was crossed in. He tries to punch it out, but doesn't. He's like hesitates, just comes off his line, and he's stuck in no man's land, and Griezmann gets the ball, slots it right between the legs of Neuer for the second goal, which at that moment killed Germany's hope. Yeah. Look, and imagine because Argentina had its chances in 2014 to win that game, and it went into extra time. Obviously, they did have their chances. If one bounced the other way, and suddenly we're talking about a German team that's lost 2 straight major final, or lost a major final and then lost in the semifinals, and previously before that, we'd be thinking about this German team much differently. That said, I think that how much of an advantage was home? Obviously, France is playing with a lot of spirit and emotion right now, and it's really propelling them forward. And they have been very successful in home major tournaments, with the European Championship in '84 and the World Cup in '98 behind them already. So, and Euro 2000. Yeah, and Euro 2000. Well, yeah, it's the other one that they won, but they weren't at home for that one. But they look. That plays a big role. So let's just talk about the Germans for a second, because we will have an opportunity to watch the French one more time. Should they be worried? This is the 2-year anniversary of the 7-1 game, so I don't know how worried this program could be. No, they're not worried. They were full measure for majority of that game. They got unlucky, like you mentioned. Bounces went on the other way. They got a call against them that could be argued, but we do believe it was a penalty. It was, the referee was right there with a perfect sideline. He was right there to see it. Well, what do you want to say? One of the best referees in the world, and he did a call, and he takes some let's just call it intestinal fortitude to call that call. So he did it. So for this game, I'm not necessarily worried. And for UCAM Low, it's tactically they were evolving. They were playing differently, and I wouldn't say better, but differently, with same result as in 2014. There's an evolution to the team. There's an evolution to the play. It's not classic German football, get the ball up top and finish it. No, they don't have a finisher since Klose retired. So they're playing more possession, kind of like in a hybrid type of system with a Spain-influenced possession, moving forward, using the width, trying not afraid of crossing the ball. So they're evolving as a football team. So I'm not necessarily worried if I were Germany at all. Yeah. They're still the favorite for Russia. I think they probably are. I mean, if you look at the Argentina's in shambles right now, I don't know how many people truly believe in Chile as a World Cup contender. I don't know whether that's fair to the Chileans either, but I'm not sure whether people do. Obviously, France won't have the home advantage in Russia.
Brazil is in shambles as well. You mentioned the 2 years anniversary from the 7-1. They're still reeling from that defeat. So.
And certainly we'll see how they react in just 3 weeks' time when the Olympic tournament gets started. That's a big healing moment possibility for them. And I think even though it's a U23 tournament, that's going to be even more vital now for them to get some confidence back by doing something at home in an Olympic tournament. So yeah, I just said it. I mean, I'm answering my own question. I think Germany still is the favorite. Do you have anything to disagree with that?
No, because they proved that they can do so on the road. It's 2 big tournaments, one that they won, one they're come to the semifinal with a tough road. They actually beat Italy, and if things would have been differently, they would have not faced France in the semi. So it's a lot of just luck wasn't necessarily with Germany, and you kind of need luck in those tournaments. We talked about this before, where everything needs to fall in place at the right time. I do feel they're their favorite heading into Russia. It's still early to tell, but they have proven that they can do so wherever the tournament is. So they can probably achieve similar type of result, at least a semi for sure in Russia.
Yeah. All right. Let's move our attention to the French and in the final. Obviously, they are the favorite. Portugal is not fancied, as we've said before. Although that said, I wasn't on the show yesterday, so just real quickly on the Portuguese win, it was their best performance of the tournament in my mind. And that goal by Ronaldo was the most muscular goal I've seen in this tournament. And it just, I'll use that term, muscular, that header. And that just shows you what that man can do in his right environment. This is a person who has won 2 of the last 3 Champions Leagues, obviously with Real Madrid surrounding him. So that's not, dismiss that. But nonetheless, Ronaldo has found a way and is a winner at every level. And no matter how much many of us dislike him, he has proven to be a guy that can step up in those biggest games and get the job done. Even if you don't like it when he rips his shirt off and shows those abs that no one possibly could have, right? Yeah. So there you go.
The jury's still out to see if they're like his or plastics. I don't know. Knowing the guy could
look like one of those like costumes. They buy like the wrestling costumes that have the abs sewn in.
Yeah, exactly. Or just implants, because those do exist. So I don't know. Who knows? But no, it's interesting. But that just go back to that header, and then there was on the broadcast a montage of all the headers he's been doing in his career since Manchester United. And it's kind of especially those type of header where he leaps 7.5, 8 feet high and just hit it so damn hard with no disregard for his personal safety. Just put that ball in the net.
Yeah. And it's because it's a simple way to evaluate the game, the final, but Portugal's in it and the ball is round and they have the best player in the tournament on their side. Anyone who thinks that they can't win on Sunday they're dreaming. Of course they can win on Sunday. The French are the favorite. They have so much talent, but Portugal is in with a chance. And in some level, and I tweeted this out at the time after the game on Wednesday, or on Tuesday, pardon me, is that it's almost like karma when you think back to 2004. Like they were roles reversed. They're going into this final as this dogged underdog that no one fancies because of their style, that no one really likes other than Portuguese people and Greek people at the time, against a host nation that is playing at a very high level. And here we are 12 years later, and the rule of 12 in the Euros, don't discount them. Just don't discount. The French are the favorite, but do not convince yourself that it's impossible for Portugal to win this game.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a fascinating game. It's a expected and unexpected final. We kind of expected France. We didn't expect Portugal. It is 2 big country in the powerhouse and the scheme of things where a lot of fan support. So it's going to be crazy. And if you can experience that game somewhere else in your own living room, do so. It's a final. Get together, enjoy the game, and go a little crazy because, that's exactly what it's there for.
I already have my spot booked. We reserved a table down at a brew pub in downtown Toronto. It's a little bit away from the hoopla that will be West Toronto and the Junction and so forth, where the Portuguese community is. Not that all the power to them. If they win, honk your damn horns till 3 a.m. next week. Whatever. Like you won a European championship, you deserve to honk your horns. So I'm not going to get into that, but I will be away from the hoopla. Kevin, it's going to be a hell of a day on Sunday here on Canadian television. We're going to wake up to Wimbledon, and then we're going to watch a European final. That's going to be fun. But there is some MLS action and some NASL action to get to in between. And with the remaining few minutes in the show, we should adjust that. The Adrian Heath lists Lions of Orlando. They don't have long to wait until we see what the new lineup's going to look like. Houston at the 8 p.m. game on Friday. Normally we build up to our games of what our game of the week is, but I'm not going to bash it on the boards. It's going to be that one. It's that Friday night game. Well, tonight at 8:00, where Orlando, we get to see what they look like without Heath. So that's my game of the week right off the top against the struggling Houston. And if Orlando can't get that win at home, then I don't know whether the firing was enough there. I don't necessarily agree with that firing either. I didn't get my opinion on that. I think that it's a little bit knee-jerk right now where they are.
Well, to be fair, they say it's a mutual parting of ways, and it's the second time we have seen that this year after Owen calling Houston.
Yes, exactly. You're correct. I did actually say the first firing out early off the show, but I forgot about Mr. Coyle because he was not really that memorable down there.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
All right. The rest of the games, let's quickly go through them. San Jose, Dallas. That's the other game tonight, 10:30. Tomorrow's game, Seattle, LA. Interesting one there. The Sounders looked terrible to me last week. They're in trouble, and if Schmidt can't turn that around, he might be the next one to go.
They're ninth in the Western Conference right now. You rarely see Seattle close to the bottom like this for a long period of time.
And it was a friendly, so grain of salt, but the attendance for the midweek friendly, and why were they playing a midweek friendly anyway? But the attendance at Seattle's midweek friendly this week was just dire, and that's not something we've ever seen, even with friendlies there before. So, obviously, any market is going to be vulnerable to losing, and Seattle is no different. And we'd hate to see the great fan support there erode even a little bit. I saw it firsthand in Toronto. It's not a pretty sight when it bottoms out after being at the top for so long, and it takes a long time to rebuild that trust back up once it's gone. So you would hope that won't happen after one season, but alas, some to watch there. Philly, DC.
That's my game of the week, Duane. Philly, DC, because Philly has to answer to New York City FC, which are first in the Eastern Conference and has momentum, 4 wins in a row. Philly has got to answer with a win, but DC United, the new look DC United with Lloyd Sam now with the club, probably still early for him to play in that game, but you never know in MLS. We've seen Kai Kamara start a game a day, like 36 hours after being traded, so you never know in MLS. But the DC United and Philly, this game is important for Philly to get back in the contention top of the East, or for DC to get things going.
And another important game for TFC is that win to get a win against the worst team in the East at home. Must win is an overused phrase in sport, but a very probably very much should win game for TFC if they're going to consider themselves contenders. Injuries aside, whatever, they need to get back on a winning track. They need points on the board so that they can overcome these injuries. That's a big one for the local 11 here in Toronto. Let's move ahead. New England, Columbus. Kind of two teams that I don't know have quite found their stride in any way this year at all. So that's a 7:30 game on Saturday. Real Salt Lake and Montreal. The 10:00 game.
No DJ Drogba.
Sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No DJ Drogba for the Impact on the Saturday. So we'll look forward to that. Look forward to Michael Salazar maybe continuing is a great first starting a match. We did Bryce last weekend, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in this game at 10 p.m. Eastern in Salt Lake City.
Yes, and the other Canadian team, the Whitecaps, play the Rapids in what would be a game that's a real test game for them. The first post-Rivero game era for the Whitecaps. We didn't really talk about Rivero being sold either.
Oh, we did like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, not really this week. It's happened.
It's Colo, and he's gone. So.
Yeah, and we've sort of, I think, talked that to death about our feelings that maybe the Whitecaps need to change their philosophy and how they find top-level scoring. But alas, we'll move aside from that. The game's on Sunday. Red Bulls, Portland, that's a good one. Portland is having a funny season, I'll say, but they're still the defending champions. The Red Bulls remain my favorites in the East until I see otherwise. I think they're the best team in the East. And SKC. NYC, the first place, NYCFC. Good God. They will wrap the week up, Kevin.
Yes, and that will be very interesting.
For quickly, the NASL, and I said earlier in the show that we wouldn't give short stick to the NASL, and we won't. I did have a great interview with Steven Sandor this week, and I mentioned that unfortunately it got corrupted, so I apologize for that. At some point, Kevin, we'll have a conversation next week where I will recall a bit of what he said, because I can listen to some of it, because there's some great stuff in it, but nonetheless, the NASL kicks off its second week of its fall season. Jacksonville, Puerto Rico, Carolina, Tampa. I'm listing the home teams first. Indy, Minnesota, Miami, Cosmos. And then on Sunday, you have the Fury and Rayo, and Edmonton will end the week against Fort Lauderdale. Nana Atacora's Fort Lauderdale Strikers. All right, Kevin, any final thoughts on the week?
Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern, the final of the Euro. France, Portugal. Allez les Bleus.
All right, fair enough. Say goodbye, Kevin.
And until then, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.